Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And the police are still not your friends, particularly if you're the grieving mother of a child who died at the hands of another. Rather than doing their jobs and following the evidence that was provided by their own experts, they decided in their minds that it must have been the mother and hounded her and eventually prosecuted her. It turns out that it wasn't her. And 20 years later, after being forced to reopen the case, they did find the actual culprit. Hint, it wasn't the mother. Why are the police like this? Why did they fixate upon one suspect? Why didn't they follow their own evidence? What is wrong with them? Is it ineptitude? Or was it deliberate? You sometimes wonder, and that is why you can never trust them. But let's look at this article and see what the hell went wrong and who will ultimately be blamed. I suspect nobody. It'll be one of those things, won't it? But here we go. Right, so I'm just going to be very careful what I say because of the YouTube algorithm, but bear with me. Police in the Ricky Neave case ignored evidence to pursue the case against his mother. The BBC investigation claims detective dismissed scientists' findings that proved the 6-year-old died in woods and not at home. The 6-year-old was found passed away and arranged in a star pose in woods near his home in Peterborough. Ricky's mother, Ruth, was initially Cambridge Police's prime suspect, and she went on trial for the crime. Police believed she had done the crime at his home before carrying his to the nearby woods in a pushchair. The new BBC podcast The Boy in the Woods claims the police dismissed their own expert forensic evidence. Scientist Professor Tony Brown found that mud on his shoes proved the child walked to the woods. The evidence was not disclosed to the jury in the Neave's trial, despite the fact it harmed the prosecution's case. I think because it harmed the prosecution's case, because then it would have come out that the police had known about this and they would have carried that prosecution through out of malice. It was a malicious prosecution. So the police claimed that she ended her son at his home before carrying his body to the nearby woods in a pushchair. She was found not guilty, but was sentenced to 7 years in prison after admitting child cruelty. For nearly 2 decades, the case remained unsolved until Cambridge Police agreed to reopen the investigation in 2015, following a repeated campaign by Neave. But she's done time for a crime. She was prosecuted for it. She was innocent of it. And then she wanted to know who done it. So she's push to find this. Anyway, thankfully, they listened and they reopened. In April this year, 40-year-old James Watson was convicted of the crime. And after damning new evidence came to light, he was sentenced to life in prison. He'll do about 12 years. However, the new BBC podcast The Boy in the Woods has claimed the police ignored expert forensic evidence that challenged the case against Neave, whilst the jury at her trial were not alerted to the findings. Now, that in itself is a crime. The not handing over of evidence by the police, from the police or by the expert witness to the defence is a crime. So I wonder if someone will go to prison for that. I suspect not. They're policemen after all. They don't go to prison if they can possibly avoid it. Scientist Professor Tony Brown, who was tasked by police with examining Ricky's clothes early in the original investigation, said the mud on his shoes proved the child walked into the woods, but never walked out again. He told the BBC that he was also offered to test Neave's pushchair for mud from the woods, but the object was never sent to him. At the time, the law allowed police not to disclose evidence to a jury that undermined the prosecution's case. My God. What? So the police will find evidence that could show that someone was innocent. They would know that person was innocent and they didn't have to release that to the defence because that would mean that everything they'd done would be wasted because they'd wasted time finding the evidence against an innocent person and they didn't want to waste the money? I don't know. This is unbelievable. A senior officer who led the 2015 re-investigation said in response to the BBC's findings that he and his team could not explain why this evidence was not used originally, but added it would not happen now. It's unbelievable that that was even a thing. I mean, we're only talking, what, 1995? It's not as though it's the 1800s here. But the police would have evidence that showed that their suspect was innocent, knowing it was innocent, knowing that the suspect was innocent, and still prosecuted anyway. That's malicious prosecution. Whoever made that decision, whoever just signed off on that, needs to go to jail. Watson was finally... But this is the police. I keep saying that. This is the police all through and through. They're not your friends. They knew the woman was innocent and prosecuted her anyway. Watson was finally brought to justice in part because of forgotten pieces of sellotape that contained clothing fibres carrying his DNA. So they've had his DNA for 20 years and didn't bother checking them. This is the police. They're inept, they're stupid, they're corrupt, and they're dangerous. People go to jail for crimes they didn't commit, even though the police know they didn't commit them. He was 13 when he carried out the crime, and whilst nearly all of the evidence had been collected in the original investigation had been destroyed or returned to Ricky's family, police found envelopes containing the pieces of sticky tape. They bore fibres collected from Ricky's clothing that were found to be a 1,000,000-to-1 match to Watson's DNA. Suspicion originally fell on Ricky's mother because of the documented instances of harm that she had inflicted upon her son. She was described in Watson's trial as a wholly unfit mother who used Ricky as a runner and a punch bag. Now, she may not have been a great mother. She may have been an awful person. But she certainly didn't do the crime that she was taken to court for. Now, I know she's done crime for other things, done time in prison for other things, and that's fair enough. Do the time for the crime. But they were prosecuting her for this, what happened to her son, and it wasn't her. And I'm not by any saying that she shouldn't have gone to prison, but the police are still incredibly wrong for trying to prosecute her. What this stinks is the police know that she's guilty of something. They'll fit her up for this and get her away, because we can't prosecute her for that, but we'll get her for something else. And that's what that is. And that's why the police are filth. They're known as the filth, and this is why they're the filth. Because they will pin crimes on people because, we can't get them for that, we'll get them for something else. We'll fit them up for something else. And that is why you can never trust a policeman. You never, ever tell a policeman, never volunteer anything. Because they will use everything they can to fit you up and get you away, even when they know you are innocent. On one occasion, Ricky was allegedly left screaming after being locked out of his house in his pyjamas. In another case, it was claimed Neave had held her son upside down on a bridge as he screamed. Again, no way was she a good person or a good mother, but she didn't end him, and that's the problem. Apparently, in the original case, Watson's name was discounted very early, and you have to ask why. Speaking on the Boy in the Woods podcast about his examination of Ricky's belongings, Professor Brown said, "I focus on one shoe, the right shoe, because it had mud on the positive tread. And that is very significant because it's the underside of your shoe. The negative bits, the grooves, they hold mud. Even if you've been in a muddy place and then walked on the streets, they will go on holding the mud. But the positive tread, that is the ridges, they don't normally have mud on them. And as soon as you go onto tarmac or a pavement or a hard surface, that'll get worn off." The fact that there was actually a lump of mud which looked the same as the mud that was on the rest of the shoe had said to me that these shoes had walked into the wood, but they hadn't walked out, and that is critical. The presenter, Winifred Robinson, said Professor Brown also offered to test a pushchair that police claimed Neave had used to carry the son, but it was never sent to him. The police knew she was innocent by this point and didn't want too much evidence to prove it. And it just goes on with other things. The fact here, this is just what I keep saying about the police. They will fit you up. They will bend evidence. They will lie. They will cheat. And they will make sure that somebody goes down for that crime, even if they can't be bothered to do their own job and find out the actual person who did it. Well, they've been caught out yet again. The police are not your friends. And I'm glad that the actual real criminal in this case has been caught, and there's some justice for Ricky at the end. Anyway, I'm going to finish there and come up. So one has to ask if the police in this case were inept or corrupt, or both. Certainly there was corruption. The very essence of justice has been corrupted. They knew she was innocent, and still they pushed the prosecution. They had evidence she didn't do it, and hid that evidence from the defence, because they knew if the defence had it, the case was blown, and all the work they'd done would be shown for what it was, a sham. And so they fitted her up and pushed the prosecution in the hope that she went down for it and they could close the book. Meanwhile, someone who really is guilty is walking around free for a further 20 years. The police got this wrong, but did they knowingly get it wrong? Well, yes, they did. They knowingly got it wrong. Who will pay? Who will fall on their sword? Who will take responsibility? It's the police. No one. And that is why you must never trust them. At least now, Ricky can be at peace. The real perpetrator is behind bars, and the mother knows she's been vindicated. Sure, she's not a very good mother, and she's an awful person. Thanks for listening, and I shall end it here now. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notification of future output. Leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, look after your children, and goodbye.